Hello and welcome back to another video. It's Grace and today I'm going to be going through my April wrap-up, so everything that I read in the month of April 2022. There were a couple interesting things about this month. I read some really great books, and one of the things I find interesting is that I listened to 3 audiobooks this month, which is more than I've ever listened to in a month before, and it was a really good experience, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And my ratings also feel pretty evenly spread out, and I think that that's a good thing. But I still had some books I really enjoyed, which is why I think it's a good thing. And I don't know, sometimes reading books that I rate lower is helpful in allowing me to determine for the future what sort of things to avoid or how I like things done in my books so that I can continue to refine what I pick up in the hopes that I will be loving what I'm reading. So in terms of reading format, I read 3 physical books, 3 audiobooks, and 1 ebook. And then in terms of rating, from top to bottom, I had 2 5-star reads, 1 4.5-star read, 2 4-star reads, 1 3-star, and 1 2-star. And I'm trying to think, I think this is the second month in a row that I have had a 2-star read. And I think that that's the first time that I've had that happen since starting BookTube, if I'm not mistaken. Which is kind of funny because some of you will probably hear that and wonder how that's even possible. Because I do tend to be a little bit more generous with my ratings. I can't help myself from rating things on the higher side. And sometimes I look back and want to raise my rating on something. And sometimes I look back and think, you know what, I really enjoyed that in the moment, but it doesn't have the longevity and staying power, so maybe I would decrease my rating of that. It can go either way, but obviously it's the end of the month and I'm only talking about the stuff that I read this month, so some of it has had more time to ruminate than others, but it was a really good reading month on the whole, so I'm not worried about it, and let's get into talking about what these books actually were. So we're going to start from the bottom because I like to end on a high note, and so that means starting with my 2-star read. This was the only ebook that I read this month. It was a classic, and that is I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. And this 2 stars might feel a little bit harsh to some people, and this is definitely one of my more controversial opinions. Just when I went on Goodreads and kind of looked at the consensus, this book does have a pretty high rating and people generally seem to enjoy it, which is great. Obviously, I'm glad that people enjoy the book, but for me, it just never quite got where it was trying to go. I wasn't vibing with it. I really wasn't vibing with the character and the type of perspective that we were in. I just wasn't on board. I think that I could have appreciated the struggle a lot more if we were in the head of a character that I even vaguely related to. I did not relate to him at all. I liked some of the science stuff and I liked some of the atmosphere that was being created, but one of the things that broke up the atmosphere for me were the time jumps. And I think that this suffered a little bit from me knowing what the ending was going to be or knowing what the concept was. And so I'm not going to say it, even though I Am Legend is very, very well known. I don't want the same thing to happen to somebody else, but I also thought that the ending felt really abrupt to me. I felt that earlier on in the book, I spent a lot of time wondering what we were doing and where we were going. And then the ending, which was supposed to be this reveal of such a great idea, just happened so fast. I didn't have time to take appreciation from it. So it really just didn't end up doing it for me, which is kind of disappointing because this was the book club pick for mine and Ben's Discord for the month of April. But I know that there are people in the Discord that liked it more than I did, and I'm happy that they did. I don't think it was a bad pick by any means. It's just a little bit disappointing for me personally. But that is it. That is my 2-star review, mini review for I Am Legend. And let's move on to my 3-star book for the month. So I listened to The Guest List by Lucy Foley on audio, and this is the first audiobook that I'm going to talk about in this wrap-up, but this was actually the final of the 3 audiobooks that I listened to this month in the order that I actually read them. And so this was a pretty good reading experience, but it was also a pretty average reading experience for me, hence the 3 stars. And given that this is a thriller, I'm really not going to say too much about the plot, but the general idea behind this book is that we are following a wedding that is to take place on a relatively remote island off the coast of Ireland on the Atlantic side. So it's quite an isolated spot, and we have the perspectives of the bride, the bridesmaid, the wedding planner, the +1, and then there's one other, the best man. So we have those 5 perspectives, and then we do have a couple of perspectives from the groom, but those come in a little bit later on. And this entire book was it was enjoyable to watch the things unfold and kind of look at a dual timeline from some of these people's past experiences versus where they are now, and the complicated emotions that they have involving each other and the couple that are getting married, and how there are a lot of undercurrents of unhappiness and secrets that are surrounding a lot of the people that are on this island together. And it was a good book, but I also thought that some of these people were just the worst. So I felt for a couple of them, and I could get invested in a couple of the characters, but for the rest of them, and especially the men, I was like, wow, you guys are just the worst. I do not want good things to happen to you. I don't, doesn't mean that I want bad things to happen to them, but I wasn't exactly rooting for them because they were not good people. So that was one thing, and I ended up being pretty pleased with the way the mystery unraveled and when we're finding out who the victim was, because we don't know at the outset who the victim of the murder actually was, and what motives different people might have had. I did enjoy that part of it. I just don't feel any particularly strong connection to this book. So, 3 stars is a nice little experience. And since I was listening to this on audio, this actually had multiple narrators, which worked really well because of the multiple perspectives, and I really enjoyed the accents of all of these characters. They all had slightly different accents, whether it was British or Irish, or is British and Irish the same thing? I can't remember what is involved in what, the UK versus Britain versus Scotland, Ireland, whatever. Ben will probably be extremely disappointed in me, but regardless, they all had slightly different accents, and it was a testament to the people giving voice to these characters that they all did really feel distinct. So I thought that the narrators did a great job, and there was also a really great atmosphere being created. So that was really great. My 3 stars aren't for the narrators, it's more just kind of for the book as a whole. And I did fly through The Guest List as it was really easy to read and consume. So if you are looking for a book like that, a page turner, this could be a great pick for you. Next up are my 2 4-star reads for the month of April. And so first I will go with the other audiobook, because in the 4-star grouping we have an audiobook and a physical book. And so the audiobook that I gave 4 stars to this month was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. And for me, the 4 stars just reflects the fact that I thought this was a really good book, really fun, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked both of the characters and the fact that this, it's sort of a romance and it's sort of a personal growth story, and it's all founded on this really strong friendship between the two characters. And so they used to go on vacation together every year, and then something happened between them that has led to things changing, and their relationship is not the same. They don't see each other the way that they did anymore. They have not really had contact with one another for quite some time, and it's sort of about them regaining their relationship and somebody taking the first step to say hey, we used to be best friends, what happened? And their development from there, I really liked it, and I liked the discussion of the ways that you can love someone unconditionally and the ways that love can work like that, and the way that you have to work at it, although it shouldn't feel I don't know, it's both it shouldn't feel like work, but you should also both be willing to put in the effort, and the fact that it's a two-way street and both people have to be able to meet and be willing to do the work for each other. I can see some people finding one of the characters in this book annoying, because I have heard that, but for me it didn't really take away from my enjoyment, because she was more the type of character where I was able to laugh it off and roll my eyes at her antics, and I didn't find it annoying to the point where it was very apparent to me and in my head the whole time. It was sort of annoying in the way that over-the-top characters sometimes can be, which was okay with me, because in this type of book, I'm kind of just looking to have something dramatic anyway, and I felt like she fit into that really well. So yeah, this was 4 stars for me, and I thought that it was a really fun book. I definitely want to pick up more by Emily Henry after reading this one. My second 4-star read of the month of April was Exhalation by Ted Chiang, and this one, my rating reflects my feelings about this overall collection, because this is a sci-fi collection of short stories and a novella, but 4 stars doesn't necessarily reflect my feelings about every story in here. And so I said this in my Goodreads review, but basically there were some stories in here that I really, really loved, and I think that Ted Chiang's ideas are phenomenal, and the fact that he is able to pack so much in terms of themes and emotion into such short page counts in a lot of these stories is really impressive, and I loved reading some of these. Unfortunately, the novella wasn't exactly to my personal taste and wasn't really up my alley, and it wasn't that it wasn't well written or not well done. I still thought that the ideas explored were really kind of interesting, and he was having deeper discussions about things, but it's just that the emotional arcs and the themes themselves weren't my favorite. And because that was the longest chunk of the book and the largest chunk of the book, it made it feel really long. And there were a few things in there that, while they were more hypothetical discussions, they made me feel a little bit icky. And it just basically kind of brought the entire thing down from a 4.5 or a 5 to a 4, which still means that overall it was really good. But there are other shorter stories in here that I had a lot more fun reading. The first one jumps out at me. I can't remember the name of it. So for those of you who have read this collection, the ones that jump out at me as my favorites are The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate, which is the very first story. What's Expected of Us, The Truth of Fact, The Truth of Feeling. I think that one might be my very favorite. I thought that the ideas that were being connected in that story were incredible. And then I really liked Omphalos and Anxiety is the Dizziness of Freedom. So those would probably all be 5 stars individually for me. But that's just kind of me looking right now and remembering which ones I loved the most. But overall, I would definitely recommend this collection, and I'm really, really glad that I did pick it up. Next up, we have my 4.5 star read for the month of April, and that is Knife of Dreams by Robert Jordan, book 11 in the Wheel of Time. And I am not going to say much about this because I just had my spoiler chat for this book go up, and also it's the 11th book in a series. What am I really going to say about the plot? I'm not going to. But my overarching reason for why I enjoyed this so much is because it was, for me, the perfect balance of like plot and character and setup and payoff. Like, this was a really good example of a middle book in a series, and I don't even know if you can call the books in the Wheel of Time middle books, because there are like 12 middle books, but you know what I mean. Like, how I felt about the previous book was that it had a lot of setup and then it didn't have any payoff for me to enjoy, whereas this one had a lot of things that I had been waiting to see for multiple books, and things that were progressing and moving along, and things that I got to be really satisfied with in terms of plot threads. So I really, really liked the events in this one. I enjoyed it, and I've heard that The Gathering Storm, the following book, is a lot of people's favorite, or one of their favorites anyway. So after reading number 11, my motivation is restored for The Wheel of Time, and I am really, really excited to get to book 12. So last up, we have my 2 5-star reads for the month of April, and naturally I have things to say about both of them because I really, really loved both of these books. And I am going to again start with the audiobook that I listened to that I gave 5 stars, and that is Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. And the reason that I picked this up is just because I was scrolling through Libby, just basically looking at the audiobooks that were available at the moment, because I had finished one and none of my holds had come up yet. And I noticed that there was an audiobook for this book, Once There Were Wolves, and I recognized Charlotte McConaughey because I had bought Migrations after hearing good things about that one, and I have that book on my shelf, and I'm hopefully going to read it soon, like in the summer. And I thought, I'm already interested in this author, so why don't I just try out this book as well? And basically the premise of Once There Were Wolves is that we follow our main character, Inti, and she is an Australian who, well, she's an Australian Canadian. Her mother lives in Sydney and her father lived in the wilderness of BC in Canada, and she studies wolves, and she is currently heading a project that is trying to rewild the Scottish Highlands and is trying to reintroduce wolves to the Scottish Highlands. So her and her team have come to this small town, this kind of isolated location, and they are trying to reintroduce the wolves here. And the setting in this book is stunning. I loved the atmosphere and the way that the Scottish Highlands were described, and even the Canadian wilderness when we had flashbacks. But this storyline is basically that the locals are not happy about this development, and there ends up being a murder, and it's uncertain whether this murder was done by wolves, who don't generally attack humans without reason, or by someone who is trying to look like the wolves murdered somebody so that they can ruin this project and make sure that, like, the wolves are gonna go away. They are not going to be a threat to livestock or to this town or etc. And this story seems like a murder mystery, and it is, but it's also really not. Like, the reason that I loved it is because it was really a story about, like, how humans interact with nature and our overarching relationship with it, and how we interact with each other, and like the emotional undercurrents and what it's like if you can really be empathetic and feel what others are feeling. And there is a lot of tough subject matter, like, discussed in this book, and so it definitely has a trigger warning for abuse and sexual abuse, and I would definitely not go into it lightly, but at the same time, I feel like it was handled with such care, and that Charlotte McConaughey was so intentional with the way that she portrayed things in this book, and it was just really delicately done. And it was the emotions and the relationships between characters and how people can grow and support each other that was really at the forefront. And there are some dark stretches of this book, but really there's an overarching feeling of hope when you finish it. And I don't know, I'm trying to be vague, but I don't really know what I can say about this book because it's not really the plot that made me like it. It's the like residual feelings that I'm left with and how much it made me feel while I was reading it. And I think that the audiobook did help somewhat with that because I forget the name of the person who narrated it, but I know it would be on Goodreads. But they definitely had like an Australian accent for our character, and there was just something about the delivery and the way that our main character Inti like internalized her thoughts and feelings and the way that it was delivered. And I don't know, it was just like perfectly formulated to make me feel things. So I loved it, and I would definitely recommend this. It's a little bit thrilling. It's more suspense than anything, and it's more like mystery and suspense. And it really is just about people and nature and like how humans have a wildness about them and how we can reconcile that. And I don't know if I can say any more than that, but when I finished this, it was a super easy 5 stars to give because I am definitely still thinking about this book and what it talked about and like what the resolution was, and I just loved it. So yeah, 10 out of 10 recommend. And then finally, to get back on brand a little bit, leaving the best for last, my other 5-star read for the month of April was Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. And I have so much to say about this, but I think that I might leave it and do a review of the entire Live Ship Traders trilogy once I finish that. But oh my goodness, like, this seriously is Robin Hobb at her best. I loved Farseer as a whole, but I think I already love Ship of Magic more than I did the entirety of Farseer, and it could be because my personal taste is to have like third-person narrative, and I like the multi-POV that we get in this book, but Robin Hobb, her ideas are just so good and her characters are so good, and I love the way that when she crafts her worlds, or I guess world because we're reading in the same overarching world, but we're reading in such a different part of the world that it really still feels different, but she just makes it feel real somehow, because even though this is undeniably fantasy, it is low fantasy in the sense that the focus is on the characters and the relationships and their lives. And it's not exactly gritty, but it is it's not exactly mundane either. But that is maybe one word that you could think of to describe it, because the characters are flawed and you root for some of them and you don't root for others, but you want to follow all of them because they're just so compelling. Like they have good traits, and then they do things that you don't like. And they are just so, like, the consequences are just very real. They're not sensationalized. They really just feel like it's a window into this world that actually exists. And this story is interesting because of what people will do, and not because the plot is dragging these people along, if that makes sense. And the idea of the live ships and the magic behind the serpents and how all of that could be interconnected with the magic that we've already seen from the Farseer part of this world. And I don't know, like, I can really see it all coming together eventually, and Robin Hobb's prose just makes the book so easy to read. I don't even think that I have anything bad to say about this. Even though that there are characters that I literally hate, I know that she's doing that on purpose. And she's doing it so well because there's one character in particular that I don't necessarily hate, even though they're not a good person. They're more like a car crash that you can't look away from. Like, they suck, but you just need to know what they're gonna do next. And I love that. I don't know, I'm really, really, really excited to start Mad Ship, which I'm gonna be doing, I think, right after I finish filming this video. And I feel like I'm not even coherent when I just talked about Ship of Magic, but there are just so many positives. I don't know. That's it. That's the tweet. needless to say, when I finished Ship of Magic, it was very easy to give it 5 stars, and despite it being extremely long, like almost 900 pages, I truly felt as though it justified its page length, which was something that I didn't necessarily feel that like Assassin's Quest always did. So there was that as well, and Robin Hobb is the queen. Like, I don't know, she deserved way more attention back when she was actually writing these books, and I'm so glad that she is finally getting it and I am getting to experience this world that she has built. So yeah, really looking forward to Mad Ship, and just so glad that I can agree with everyone on how much they all love the Live Ship Traders series. Anyway, those are the 7 books that I read in the month of April 2022. Please let me know down in the comments what you read this month, what you think about these books that I read, and if you agree with me on them or not. I'm really interested to hear from you. And please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you would like to see more content from me. I post new videos every Monday and Thursday, and I have information about my Discord linked down in the description below. And I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!